The roar of a Harley Davidson motorcycle is more than just the sound of an engine. It's the sound of American rebellion, freedom, and power. But today, that legendary rumble is being drowned out by the voice of a man who built his career on shaking up the establishment. Donald J. Trump. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable icon? Chaos. And it's only just begun. Harley Davidson, a company that built its name on American muscle, is now facing a full-scale attack, not from a foreign competitor, not from an economic downturn, but from the very President of the United States. Donald Trump has accused the legendary motorcycle brand of betrayal, cowardice, and abandoning its country, setting off a firestorm that has Harley dealerships across America on edge.
I think the people that ride Harleys are not happy with Harley Davidson, and I wouldn't be either.
What started as a simple business decision is now turned into a political and cultural war, with Trump calling for a boycott of the brand he once praised as a symbol of American greatness. The president is furious, the customers are divided, and Harley's stock is plummeting. How did it all spiral out of control? And more importantly, who will survive this battle? The tariff trap. It all began with a promise. America first. That was Trump's campaign battle cry. His goal, to protect American jobs by imposing heavy tariffs on imported steel and aluminum. For most companies, this was just another policy shift, but for Harley Davidson, it was a financial death sentence.
So I was disappointed in Harley, because I like Harley, and I was disappointed that they would be moving some of their operation to another country. I don't like that.
Harley had already been struggling for years. Sales were down, younger riders weren't interested, and overseas markets were becoming more crucial to the company's survival. But when the Trump administration slapped a 25% tariff on steel and a 10% tariff on aluminum, the cost of building a Harley skyrocketed overnight. Then came the counterpunch. The European Union retaliated, hitting American motorcycles, including Harley Davidson, with a 31% tariff. Suddenly, every bike Harley exported to Europe was thousands of dollars more expensive, pricing them out of one of their biggest markets. With no way to absorb the financial hit, Harley made the decision that would change everything. They announced that to stay competitive, they would move some production overseas, and that's when Trump's fury exploded. Trump's betrayal or Harley's survival? The president's response was swift and brutal. Harley Davidson should never be built in another country. Never, he tweeted. If they move, it will be the beginning of the end. What followed was a relentless Twitter assault. Trump blasted the company, claiming they were using tariffs as an excuse to abandon America. He accused Harley of turning its back on American workers and vowed they would be taxed like never before. But here's what Trump didn't mention. Harley Davidson had already been producing bikes overseas for years. Factories in Brazil, India, and Thailand were already part of their global strategy long before Trump took office. This wasn't about betrayal. This was about survival. For Harley, the numbers were clear. They either moved some production overseas or lost an entire generation of European customers. It was a tough call, but for them it wasn't personal. It was business. For Trump, it was very personal. The boycott that backfired. Trump's Twitter tirade didn't just rally his base, it divided the very people who made Harley Davidson what it is today. Across the country, some Harley riders pledged their loyalty to the president, vowing to never buy another Harley until the company reversed its decision. But something strange happened. The backlash didn't sink Harley Davidson, it backfired on Trump. Many lifelong Harley riders saw Trump's attacks as government interference in a private business decision, something that went against the very freedom and independence that Harley stood for. And then came the most shocking twist of all. Harley's core customers, the baby boomers and Gen X riders, started pointing fingers not at Harley, but at Trump's tariffs. Instead of rallying behind the president, many riders began questioning whether his trade war was actually hurting American businesses instead of helping them. Harley Davidson was not about to go down without a fight. The company doubled down, refusing to backtrack on its plans. Instead, they announced a new strategy, looking to expand into untapped markets, invest in electric motorcycles, and rebrand themselves for the future. But as Harley tried to move forward, Trump refused to let go. The attacks continued, the political firestorm intensified, and soon Harley Davidson found itself at the center of a battle it never wanted to fight. The war was far from over, and what came next, no one saw coming. The fallout began. decades. Harley Davidson was never just a motorcycle company. It was a symbol of rebellion, freedom, and the open road. But now that symbol was being torn apart, caught between a political battlefield that no one saw coming. The fallout from Trump's attack wasn't just about corporate decisions and tariffs, it was about identity. Across America, riders found themselves in the middle of a raging war, not on asphalt, but in bars, garages, and online forums. At rallies, lifelong Harley riders debated whether the company had betrayed America or whether Trump had turned his back on American business. Some dealerships reported a drop in sales, with customers refusing to buy a Harley as long as production was being moved overseas. But others, they saw Trump's boycott call as nothing more than political grandstanding, a way to rally his base at the expense of an American company. Riders who had spent their lives on Harley Davidsons weren't about to switch brands over a few tweets. The real question was, how much damage had already been done? The stock market shock. While riders debated on the streets, the real pain was being felt in boardrooms. Harley Davidson stock had already been on shaky ground, with declining sales and a shrinking customer base. But Trump's public assault on the brand made things 10 times worse. Within days of the president's boycott tweet, Harley stock tumbled. Investors, already nervous about the company's future, panicked. They weren't just worried about tariffs anymore, now they were worried about brand damage. How could a company known for American pride survive a direct attack from the President of the United States? Harley's leadership scrambled to contain the damage. CEO Matthew Levatich went on the defensive, releasing statements clarifying that Harley wasn't abandoning the U.S. They reassured American customers that every bike sold in the U.S. would still be made in the U.S., but the damage had already been done. To make matters worse, some of Harley's biggest competitors, Indian Motorcycle, BMW, and Ducati, pounced on the opportunity. Indian released subtle marketing jabs, promoting their bikes as proudly assembled in America. Meanwhile, foreign manufacturers started making aggressive moves to scoop up the next generation of riders that Harley was struggling to attract. The reality of globalization. Here's the truth that no one wanted to admit. Harley Davidson's move to shift some production overseas wasn't about politics. It was about economic survival. For years, Harley had been expanding internationally. In markets like India, Brazil, and Thailand, where high import tariffs made American-made Harleys far too expensive, setting up local production wasn't a betrayal. It was common business sense. In fact, Harley wasn't the only company doing it. Ford, General Motors, and even companies like Apple had been outsourcing production for decades to stay competitive. But unlike those corporations, Harley Davidson was a symbol, a brand built on its American roots, and that made its decision far more controversial. For decades, Harley had marketed itself as an American legend, a brand that represented working-class grit and rebellion. And now, it was being painted as just another corporation chasing profits overseas. What no one wanted to acknowledge was that the motorcycle industry itself was changing. Harley's core customers, the baby boomers, were aging out of the market, and younger generations weren't as interested in big, expensive cruisers. Sales had been declining for years, and without international markets, Harley wouldn't survive another decade. Harley wasn't turning its back on America. It was fighting to stay alive. The unexpected consequences. As the dust settled, something unexpected happened. Trump's war on Harley started backfiring. At first, the president's attacks seemed devastating. The boycott calls, the Twitter rants, the threats of even higher taxes, all of it put Harley in a dangerous position. But then, something shifted. Trump's war against Harley had brought something to light. His tariffs weren't protecting American jobs, they were hurting them. The media jumped on the story. News outlets across the country ran headline after headline, exposing the real impact of the trade war. Small businesses that relied on steel and aluminum were suffering. Other American manufacturers were starting to cut jobs. And suddenly people started asking, was Trump's trade war doing more harm than good? Harley, once seen as the villain in the story, started to look more like a victim. The company refused to back down, continuing with its international expansion plans while standing firm on its American roots. They weren't going to let political pressure dictate their survival. As Harley Davidson braced for the next battle, one thing became clear. This war was far from over. Trump had doubled down, vowing to keep the pressure on. But Harley wasn't backing down either. And as tensions escalated, something was about to happen that no one saw coming. The chaos was just getting started. started. The trade war tightens. It wasn't just about tweets anymore. Behind the scenes, real economic policies were being shaped that would put Harley Davidson in an even tighter position. Trump's administration doubled down on tariffs. The cost of imported steel and aluminum, crucial materials for Harley's American factories, kept rising. The company had already been struggling with rising production costs, and now it was getting even worse.
At the same time, the European Union wasn't backing down either. They saw what Trump was doing to Harley and they retaliated. More tariffs, higher import taxes on American motorcycles. Suddenly, Harley's overseas business, which had been its lifeline, was starting to collapse.
Harley Davidson was being crushed from both sides, and then came the worst blow of all. The unthinkable happens. In a shocking turn of events, Harley Davidson announced something no one expected. They were cutting production in the United States. They had no choice. The rising costs, the falling sales, the tariff war that wouldn't end, it was all too much. Harley had been losing money for years, but now the losses were piling up too fast to ignore. The company's leadership made the toughest decision in its history. They would close several U.S. factories and move even more production overseas. For Trump, this was the ultimate betrayal. The man who had built his presidency on Made in America had just watched one of America's most iconic brands shift jobs out of the country because of his own policies. Trump's reaction? Pure fury. Within hours, he was back on Twitter. Harley Davidson has abandoned America. They turned their backs on their workers and they will pay the price. We will make sure that companies who betray our country do not succeed. The message was clear. Trump was coming for Harley, and he wasn't the only one. The backlash begins. The public reaction was explosive. News stations blasted the story. Social media was on fire. Some people rallied behind Trump, calling for an all-out boycott. They filmed themselves burning their Harley gear, smashing Harley merchandise, and vowing never to buy another bike from the company again. But others, they saw Trump as the real problem. Motorcycle communities erupted in anger. Harley isn't the enemy, they said. The tariffs are. The trade war is.
Even business leaders started speaking out.
And then, something truly unexpected happened. Trump's own advisors started urging him to back down. The trade war was hurting more companies than just Harley. Automakers, steelworkers, farmers, all of them were starting to feel the economic squeeze. But Trump, he refused to listen. Instead, he promised that even bigger tariffs were coming. And just like that, the Harley-Davidson war became something even bigger. It became a symbol of Trump's entire economic strategy. The question now wasn't just who would win this battle.
The question was, how much destruction would it leave in its wake?
The final showdown. Harley-Davidson was on the ropes. The company had been through hard times before. The Great Depression, foreign competition, economic downturns. But this was something entirely different. The trade war had pushed the company to its financial limits. Sales in the U.S. had plummeted. International markets, which had once been Harley's escape route, were now cut off by tariffs and rising costs. The company had been forced to lay off American workers, cut production, and shrink its model lineup just to stay afloat.
Meanwhile, Trump wasn't backing down. He doubled down on his attacks, making Harley a prime example of what he called corporate betrayal. At rallies, he spoke directly to his base. Harley-Davidson turned their back on America. We gave them tax cuts, we gave them opportunities, and what did they do? They shipped jobs overseas. That's not how we do business in this country. If they don't want to be American, then Americans shouldn't buy their bikes. The crowds roared in agreement.
But behind the scenes, Harley was already making its next move. The gamble that could save or destroy Harley. Harley's leadership knew they had one last shot to turn things around. If they didn't act fast, they wouldn't just be losing this battle. They'd be losing the company itself. They had to make a choice. Fight back or bow down. And so they did something bold. Harley-Davidson went all in on a new strategy. A strategy that had nothing to do with Trump, nothing to do with trade wars, nothing to do with old school Harley culture. They unveiled a massive shift toward the future.
More electric bikes, more small displacement motorcycles for global markets, more focus on innovation,
and in the biggest twist of all, they started actively marketing to younger riders in a way they never had before. Trump's last stand. Trump saw what was happening and he wasn't happy about it. Harley-Davidson had been a symbol of American power and industry, a company that fit perfectly into his narrative, and now they were trying to move on without him. At a rally in Wisconsin, Harley's home state, Trump fired one last shot. Harley-Davidson's struggles weren't unique. Other companies were suffering too. The auto industry was getting hit. Farmers were struggling. Prices on everything were going up. And more people started asking the question, was Harley really the problem? Or was Trump's trade war making everything worse. The media picked up on it. Business leaders spoke out. Economists warned that Trump's tariffs were doing more harm than good. Suddenly, Trump wasn't just fighting Harley anymore. He was fighting the entire economic reality of his own policies. The aftermath. This is the final showdown, the moment where Harley and Trump both face the consequences of their actions. A battle that started with tariffs and tweets became something far bigger, a fight for survival, a fight for identity, and a fight that changed the future of American business forever. That's it for today's topic. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to see more of these videos, go check out our channel where you will see more of these interesting videos about Harley Davidson.